At my brother's company launch party, my dad stood up, raised his glass, and said, "Some people are meant to lead. Others are meant to support." Everyone laughed lightly. Everyone clapped. Jason smiled like the future already belonged to him. I was standing near the balcony, holding a drink I hadn't touched, realizing something uncomfortable. They weren't talking about leadership. They were talking about hierarchy. They had already decided who the visionary was and who was just reliable. I remember looking around that rooftop at the banners with his name on them and my parents glowing with pride and understanding something I should have understood years earlier. I was never competing with my brother. I was competing with a role they had already written for me. And that was the night I stopped trying to win. I don't remember the first time I realized my brother was different. I remember the first time I realized I was. It was subtle at first. Small things. Easy to ignore if you wanted to believe your family was normal. Jason is 3 years older than me. Growing up, that meant he got everything first. First bike, first phone, first car, first freedom. That part made sense. He was older. What didn't make sense was how permanent it felt. When Jason brought home A, B in math, my parents sat at the kitchen table with him for hours, discussing tutoring options. My mom printed worksheets. My dad rearranged his schedule to help him study. When I brought home straight A's the next semester, my report card stayed on the fridge for maybe 2 days. No discussion, no celebration, just a nod. "Good job," my mom said while washing dishes. Jason's soccer practice was more important. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself being low maintenance was a strength. Jason was loud, charismatic, confident. Teachers liked him. Coaches liked him. Relatives loved him. He could walk into a room and own it within minutes. I learned to stay quiet. At family gatherings, the pattern was always the same. Jason made varsity. Jason's thinking about business school. Jason's already talking to investors. I'd sit at the edge of the couch holding a soda, waiting for someone to ask me something. Sometimes they did. "Oh, and you? How's school?" Before I could answer, someone would interrupt to ask Jason about his latest plan. It wasn't cruelty. That's the strange part. No one was openly mean to me. I was just background. When Jason turned 16, my parents surprised him with a brand new car. Silver, shiny, parked in the driveway with a red bow like something out of a commercial. My dad gave a speech. "We believe in investing in potential." I clapped with everyone else. 2 years later, when I turned 16, I got my grandmother's old sedan. It smelled faintly like mothballs and had a dent in the rear bumper. "It still runs," my dad said. "Be grateful." And I was. That's what I did best. I adapted. Jason got a fully paid college education. My parents called it a strategic investment. I got financial aid forms and a conversation about responsibility. "You're independent," my mom told me. "You'll figure it out." That phrase followed me everywhere. "You'll figure it out." Jason never had to. When he struggled in college, my parents covered his rent. When I struggled, I picked up extra shifts. When Jason switched majors twice, it was exploration. When I mentioned wanting to change fields, my dad frowned. "Finish what you start." The rules weren't written anywhere, but they were consistent. And consistency makes patterns impossible to deny. The real turning point wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some explosive argument or shocking betrayal. It was a dinner. Jason had just graduated. My parents rented a private room at a restaurant. Extended family showed up. There were speeches, a custom cake, a slideshow. My mom cried during her toast. "This is what dedication looks like," she said, looking directly at him. "This is what we always knew you'd become." Everyone applauded. I did too. A year later, when I graduated, we had takeout at home. My mom handed me an envelope with a small gift card inside. "We didn't want to make a big deal," she said. "You're not really the spotlight type." That sentence stayed with me longer than anything else. Not really the spotlight type. I went to bed that night, staring at the ceiling in my childhood bedroom, listening to Jason laugh downstairs with my parents as they discussed his next big opportunity. Something inside me shifted. Not anger, not jealousy, clarity. I realized something I should have understood years earlier. I was competing in a race that was already decided. And that was the night I stopped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. I stopped trying to impress them. I stopped volunteering my achievements. I stopped correcting assumptions. If they wanted Jason to be the future, they could have him. For the first time in my life, I stopped asking for validation. And the strange part? No one noticed. That was the beginning. When I stopped competing, nothing exploded. There was no dramatic confrontation. No, why don't you love me the same? Speech. I was pulled back. And when you pull back, you start seeing things differently. At first, my parents didn't notice. Jason still dominated every conversation. Every dinner revolved around his latest idea, a startup pitch, a networking event, a potential investor. He had this way of talking like success was already guaranteed. Once this takes off, when I scale this, my mentor says, my parents leaned forward every time he spoke. I leaned back. I had started my first real job by then, a junior analyst position at a mid-sized logistics company. Nothing flashy, just steady, stable. When I mentioned it at dinner, my mom smiled politely. That's good. Stability is important. When Jason mentioned he was in talks to join a new venture with some guys he met at a conference, my dad looked at him like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. That's how big things start. Same table, same parents, different energy. The more I observed, the clearer the pattern became. Jason's ambition was always framed as vision. Mine was framed as safety. Jason could take risks because he was destined for something big. If I took risks, it was reckless. One night, about 6 months after I stopped trying, Jason announced he needed capital for his new business idea. My parents didn't hesitate. How much? My dad asked. $50,000 to start, Jason said casually, like he was asking for help moving a couch. My mom winced at the number, but only for a second. If this is what you believe in, she said, we believe in you. They didn't even ask for a business plan. They didn't ask for projections. They didn't ask how he planned to repay them. They called it support. A week later, I mentioned I was thinking about going back for a specialized certification that would double my earning potential long term. The tuition was $12,000. My dad didn't look up from his plate. You're already working. Why add debt? It's not debt, I said calmly. It's an investment. Silence. Jason cleared his throat. I mean, you've always been more of a behind-the-scenes guy anyway. He didn't say it maliciously. That was the worst part. It was just assumed. My mom nodded. You don't need to prove anything. You're steady, reliable, safe. Words that sound like compliments until you realize what they're replacing. Visionary, brilliant, exceptional. I felt something tighten in my chest that night. Not anger, not jealousy, something colder. It wasn't that they believed in Jason more. It was that they had already decided who I was. And nothing I did would update that version. After that dinner, I stopped sharing plans altogether. When I got promoted 8 months later, I didn't tell them for weeks. When I moved into a better apartment, I didn't invite them over. When I started taking night courses anyway, paying for them myself, I didn't mention it. And the strange thing? They didn't ask. Jason's business struggled almost immediately. Delays, budget issues, supplier problems. Each time something went wrong, my parents stepped in again. It's normal in early stages. Every entrepreneur faces setbacks. Big rewards require big risks. I wonder what they'd say if I failed. But I already knew. At a family barbecue that summer, when my uncles asked what I'd been up to, before I could answer, Jason jumped in. He's just working his office job. Solid stuff. You know him. Everyone laughed lightly. Just working. Just. I forced a smile. That night, I replayed the moment in my head. Not because it was cruel, because it was casual. That's when I understood something dangerous. When people define you early, they stop listening later. I had spent years trying to be impressive enough to rewrite the script, but they had already printed it. And that's when the distance really began. I started declining dinners, missing calls, responding with short texts. Not out of spite, out of clarity. If I was the supporting character in their story, I'd stop auditioning for a lead role. I focused on work instead, on skill, on building something that didn't require applause. Jason kept chasing scale. I kept building foundation. And foundations don't look impressive until something collapses. Jason's company officially launched 18 months after that barbecue. It was a launch party. Of course there was. My parents rented out a rooftop event space downtown. String lights, catered food, custom banners with his company logo printed in bold black letters. My mom wore a new dress. My dad practiced a speech in the car on the way there. "It's important to show confidence," he said. Jason moved through the room like he already owned it. He shook hands with people I didn't recognize. Investors, former classmates, people who spoke loudly about growth and scale and synergy. Every time someone asked my parents about him, they glowed. "That's our son." I stood near the edge of the balcony with a drink in my hand, watching the skyline. I had taken a day off work to attend, not because I felt obligated, because some part of me still wanted to be present. At one point, a former neighbor approached me. "So what do you do again?" Before I could answer, Jason appeared beside us. "He's in logistics," he said smoothly. "Very stable, very structured." The way he said structured felt like a polite way of saying limited. The neighbor nodded. "Well, not everyone's built for risk." Jason laughed. "Exactly. It was subtle. Again, but it wasn't invisible." Later in the evening, my dad tapped his glass to make a toast. Everyone quieted. He talked about vision, about boldness, about believing in yourself. Then he said it. Some people are meant to lead. Others are meant to support. And that's okay. People clapped. I felt my stomach drop. He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't have to. After the toast, I stepped inside to get some air. Jason followed me a few minutes later. "You're quiet tonight," he said. "Just observing." He smirked slightly. "You always were better at that." There was again. Not cruel, not loud, just reinforcing the role. "You ever think about doing something bigger?" he asked casually. "You've got the brains. You just don't have the edge." I looked at him. "And what does that mean?" He shrugged. "Some people are comfortable being second." The music outside grew louder as the party continued. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Something heavier. Acceptance. That night, I went home early. No one noticed. A month later, things started slipping. Jason's company missed a major delivery deadline. One of his suppliers backed out. Payroll was delayed. At Sunday dinner, he looked tense for the first time in years. "It's temporary," he said quickly when my mom asked about it. "Just scaling pains." My dad nodded. "Great things aren't built overnight." Jason looked at me across the table. "You wouldn't get it. Corporate structures don't teach you resilience." My fort paused midair. I could have responded. I could have listed the certifications I'd completed quietly over the past year. I could have mentioned the team I was now managing, the department restructure I had led. Instead, I just said, maybe, because something had changed. I wasn't trying to win arguments anymore. I was watching patterns. Over the next few months, the cracks widened. A lawsuit from a dissatisfied client, an investor pulling out, cash flow problems. Each time something went wrong, my parents defended him. Entrepreneurship is hard. Jealous people try to sabotage success. Jason grew sharper, shorter temper, more defensive. At another family gathering, an aunt asked how business was going. Jason snapped. "Fine." The room went quiet. My dad looked embarrassed. My mom quickly changed the subject to me. "So how's your job?" Before I could answer, Jason cut in. He probably got another Employee of the Month certificate. A few relatives chuckled awkwardly. I didn't. I set my glass down carefully. "Actually," I said calmly, "I got promoted." The room shifted slightly. My mom blinked. "Oh, that's nice." Jason tilted his head. "To what?" "Senior Operations Manager." Silence. Then Jason smiled. "Still someone else's company." It landed. And for the first time, it didn't sting the way it used to. Because I wasn't trying to compete anymore. I was building something different. And I was almost done. The breaking point didn't happen at a dinner. It didn't happen during a speech. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon in my office. Jason called. He never called me directly unless he needed something. I let it ring twice before answering. Hey, he said quickly, skipping any greeting. You busy? I'm at work. Right. Yeah. Listen, I need a favor. There it was. No build-up. No pride swallowed. Just assumption. What kind of favor? He hesitated for half a second. You still have contacts and logistics, right? Yes. I need a bridge. Short term. We're waiting on funds to clear, but payroll is tight. If I can secure a contract extension or delay supplier payments, I can stabilize. He spoke fast. Too fast. For the first time, I heard something unfamiliar in his voice. Uncertainty. How much? I asked. 80,000. 80. Not 50 this time. Not 12. 80. For how long? Couple months. 3 max. I leaned back in my chair. And what happens if it's not 3? Silence. Then, it will be. He said it like he was convincing himself. I thought about the rooftop toast. Some people are meant to lead. Others are meant to support. I thought about the way he'd said. Some people are comfortable being second. I thought about my father's voice. You'll figure it out. I realized something in that moment. This wasn't about money. It was about hierarchy. He wasn't asking because he believed in me. He was asking because he assumed I would say yes. Because that was my role. Support. Stability. Backup. I can't, I said calmly. The silence on the other end stretched. What do you mean you can't? I mean I won't. His breathing changed slightly. It's temporary. I'm sure it is. You're really going to let your own brother sink. There it was. Not partnership. Not humility. Guilt. I'm not letting you sink, I said evenly. I'm just not rescuing you. He exhaled sharply. So this is about ego? No, I replied. This is about responsibility. The call ended without goodbye. That night, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. My mom looked stressed. My dad looked angry. What are you doing? My dad demanded as soon as I opened the door. Good evening to you too. You know he's under pressure, my mom said. Family helps family. I stepped aside and let them in. They sat on my couch like they owned the place. He said you refused to support him, my dad continued. I nodded. Yes. The words seemed to shock him. You're being petty. Am I? My mom's eyes softened. He just needs a little time. I looked at them both carefully. Did you ever think I needed time? They didn't answer. When I asked for help with my certification, you said I didn't need it. When I worked nights and weekends, you said I was fine. When he needed 50,000, it was an investment. That's different, my dad snapped. What? Silence. Because they didn't have an answer. Because the real answer wasn't something they could say out loud. Because he was always the one they bet on. And I was always the safe fallback. My mom stood up slowly. So that's it? You're just going to watch him fail. I met her eyes calmly. I'm going to let him lead. The same way they always said he was meant to. They left shortly after. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just disappointment. But for the first time in my life, it didn't weigh on me. Because something inside me had snapped. Not emotionally. Strategically. I stopped wanting their approval. Completely. Not quietly hoping it would change. Not adjusting my behavior to earn it. Just stopped. Over the next 2 months, Jason's situation worsened. Employees left. Vendors tightened terms. Investors stopped returning calls. At another family dinner, he barely spoke. My dad tried to carry the conversation, but the energy had shifted. People could feel it. For the first time, Jason wasn't the rising star. He was the liability. And something else happened during that dinner. No one asked me what I was doing. Not because they weren't interested. Because they had started to sense something had changed. I wasn't sitting quietly anymore. I wasn't leaning forward for approval. I was calm, detached, and that unsettled them more than any argument ever could. Because when the supporting character stops seeking validation, the entire story feels unstable. And that was the moment I understood something powerful. I didn't need to compete. I didn't need to win. I just needed to step out of the role they assigned me and let gravity do the rest. Jason's company didn't collapse in a dramatic explosion. It faded, slowly, like a building with structural cracks no one wanted to admit were serious. Employees started leaving first. Then smaller contracts quietly disappeared. Then came a legal notice, not a massive lawsuit, just enough to tighten everything. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. I felt validated, because this was never about revenge. It was about probability. Jason had always operated on belief. I operated on structure, and structure always outlasts belief. Around that time, my company announced an expansion into a new regional division. Operations, logistics, vendor management, the kind of thing I had been quietly preparing for over the last 2 years. When the executive team called me into the conference room, I already knew what it was about. We're restructuring, my director said, and we need someone to run the new division. He didn't hype it. He didn't dramatize it. He just looked at me and said, "You're steady." Funny how that word sounds different when it comes from someone who values it. The promotion came with equity. Not flashy, not headline-worthy, but meaningful. Meaningful enough that for the first time in my life, I wasn't just earning a salary. I was building ownership. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell my parents immediately. I didn't send Jason a screenshot. I just signed the papers. 3 weeks later, I was invited to speak at an internal leadership summit. Not as a keynote, just as a division head discussing operational stability in volatile markets. I stood at the podium and spoke about sustainable growth, risk assessment, long-term planning. People listened. Afterward, one of the board members approached me. "You think 5 years ahead," he said. "That's rare." I nodded politely, because I've been thinking 5 years ahead my whole life. I just never said it out loud. Meanwhile, Jason was shrinking. He sold equipment to stay afloat. Let go of staff he had once bragged about building a culture with. The same investors who once praised his vision stopped answering calls. My parents' tone changed. Subtly, they no longer opened dinners with Jason's latest plan. They avoided business updates altogether. At one dinner, my dad cleared his throat awkwardly. "So how's work?" The question wasn't dismissive this time. It was cautious. "Busy," I said. "What exactly are you doing now?" I explained briefly. Division management, equity structure, expansion planning. No exaggeration, just facts. Jason stared at his plate. My mom blinked slowly. "Oh," she said. "That was it." "Oh." But this "so" carried more weight than applause ever had. Because for the first time, they realized something without me saying it. I wasn't behind. I wasn't second. I was ahead, just on a different track. A week later, Jason asked to meet. Not at home, not at dinner, at a coffee shop. Neutral ground. He looked thinner, quieter. "Things are tight," he admitted. No bravado, no smirk. "I know." He looked up. "I thought you'd step in." "Why?" He hesitated. "Because that's what you do. Support. Stabilize. Catch the fall." I held his gaze. "Not anymore." He swallowed. "You're really going to let me lose everything?" I considered that carefully. "You didn't lose everything," I said calmly. "You just built it on unstable ground." That landed, harder than any insult. He leaned back in his chair. "You always thought you were smarter than me." "No," I replied. I just stopped trying to prove it. There was no shouting, no dramatic walkout, just silence, because the hierarchy had shifted, and he could feel it. Not because I humiliated him, because I didn't. I didn't attack. I didn't expose him. I didn't mock him. I simply stopped playing the role they wrote for me. And when you remove the safety net from someone who expects it, they finally have to learn how to stand. Jason eventually filed for bankruptcy protection. Not catastrophic, not scandalous, just public. The rooftop banners came down. The speeches stopped. And for the first time in our lives, no one introduced him as the visionary. They just introduced him. The bankruptcy filing wasn't dramatic. No police cars, no shouting matches, no scandal headlines, just paperwork and silence. For weeks, no one in the family group chat mentioned business at all. The subject simply vanished, like it had never existed. Jason moved into a smaller apartment across town. He picked up consulting work where he could. Nothing glamorous. Enough to survive. My parents adjusted quietly. The tone at dinners changed. There were fewer speeches, fewer grand declarations about destiny. More practical conversations. About bills. About healthcare. About reality. One Sunday afternoon, my dad asked if I could come over early. Just you, he said. When I arrived, Jason wasn't there. My mom sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she hadn't touched. My dad cleared his throat the way he always did before admitting something uncomfortable. We may have overextended, he said carefully. Not we favored him. Not we were wrong. Overextended. They had taken loans to help Jason stabilize during his final months. Co-signed things they assumed would rebound. They didn't rebound. Now, they were carrying weight they hadn't anticipated at their age. We're not asking for a handout, my dad added quickly. That word again. Handout. We just need advice. You're good with structure. I noticed something then. He wasn't angry. He wasn't proud. He was uncertain. And uncertainty didn't look good on him. I sat down across from them. What exactly do you need? We went through numbers. Debts. Payment timelines. Refinancing options. I explained calmly what could be done and what couldn't. There was no, I told you so. No satisfaction. Just facts. My mom watched me closely the entire time. After we finished, she said quietly, "You've changed." "No," I replied. I stopped competing. That hung in the air. My dad looked down at the paperwork. "We always thought pushing you would make you stronger." I almost laughed. "You didn't push me. You ignored me." Silence. Not defensive silence. Real silence. The kind that only happens when something lands. A week later, Jason showed up at my apartment unannounced. He stood in the doorway for a moment like he wasn't sure if he should knock. "You busy?" he asked. "No." He stepped inside slowly. The confidence was gone, not replaced by shame. Just reality. "I owe you an apology," he said. I waited. "I treated you like backup." It wasn't dramatic. He didn't look emotional. He just said it. "I thought you were comfortable being second." I leaned against the counter. "I wasn't comfortable," I said calmly. "I was patient." He nodded slowly. "I didn't think you'd ever stop helping." "I didn't stop helping," I said. "I stopped carrying." That was the difference. We talked for almost an hour. About pressure. About expectations. About what it feels like to grow up believing you're supposed to win. He admitted something I never expected. "I was terrified of disappointing them," he said quietly. That surprised me. All those years, I thought he thrived in the spotlight. Turns out he was trapped in it. That didn't erase what happened, but explained it. A month later, I invited my parents and Jason to dinner at my place. Nothing fancy. No speeches. No announcements. Just food. We talked about normal things. Work. Health. Life. No one mentioned vision. No one mentioned supporting roles. The hierarchy wasn't discussed. It didn't need to be, because it was gone. Not replaced. Removed. Jason found steady work eventually. Smaller scale. Less risk. More sustainable. My parents adjusted their expectations. And me? I kept building. Quietly. The difference now is that I don't measure my success against anyone else's narrative. I don't try to impress them. I don't try to outshine him. I don't compete. Because competition only exists when you believe you're in the same race. I was never in Jason's race. And he was never in mine. The night of his launch party, when my dad said some people are meant to lead and others are meant to support, he wasn't wrong. He just misunderstood what leadership looks like. Leadership isn't loud. It isn't flashy. It isn't banners and rooftop speeches. It's stability. It's structure. It's endurance. I didn't beat my brother. I outlasted the expectations. And that changed everything.